Good evening, viewers. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm your host, Sheerin, Raina, and you're watching Keeping Up with Kashmir. There have been reports that the Indian government is taking extra security measures in Kashmir. What's going on? Let's take a look. National Security Advisor Ajit Doval is in Kashmir. The Amarnath Yatra has been cut short for the very first time. All visitors are being asked to leave Kashmir. Additional forces have been flown into the valley. Internet and telephone lines have been suspended. Kashmiri leaders are under house arrest. The cabinet meeting has been called. What's more concerning is that no one in the state administration or New Delhi is coming up with a clarification or explanation for any of this. Keep watching to find out more.
It is official! Everyone on Twitter is going crazy. Facebook is abuzz. Just moments ago, today at 11:14 a.m., Article 370, which was in effect for 72 years, has been scrapped by Amit Shah in just 5 minutes, going down in history as a momentous decision. The blunder that was created 72 years ago has now been corrected. If you didn't know that Kashmir was a country within a country, then you are not alone. Most Indians didn't even know that Kashmir had its own flag, constitution, and even back in the day, its own prime minister. If you want a 360 review on Article 370 and how it played a crucial role in preventing Jammu and Kashmir from uniting with India, then keep watching for a special edition.
To understand Article 370, one must go back in time and understand the dynamics on the negotiation table, the players involved, and what it meant for the people of Jammu, Kashmir, and the forgotten Ladakh. Let me take you on a journey to understand the context in which the article was crafted, drafted, and inserted into the Constitution. Before independence, the British ruled India in two ways: the directly ruled British-owned province and the indirectly ruled 562 princely states, which were under direct control of a Hindu or a Muslim ruler. When Britishers were leaving India, they divided it into two countries. Hindu-dominated became India, and Muslim-dominated became Pakistan. Only the provinces in yellow were getting independent. The princely states in blue were not technically under direct British rule, and their fate was in their own hands to join either country. The only problem was that India couldn't form a union with a map like this. India gave this formidable task into the able hands of Sardar Patel and V.P. Menon. They convinced every princely state to join India, but the ruler of Jammu and Kashmir was unable to decide. The state Jammu and Kashmir included Jammu, Kashmir, and Ladakh. Maharaja Hari Singh was the Hindu king of a Muslim-majority state, and there was no political uprising, but it had to happen someday. Ladakh had a Buddhist majority, whereas Jammu was largely Hindu. Kashmiri Pandits suffered centuries of oppression and forceful conversion by Muslim invaders. It changed the demographics of the Kashmir Valley from Hindu to Muslim majority. July 19, 1931 is marked as Kashmir agitation. Kashmiri Muslims, unhappy with Hari Singh's policies, protested in Srinagar. This resulted in violent events, such as the attack of Hindu traders from Maharajganj in Srinagar, and Hindu shops being looted from Bori Kadal to Ali Kadal. As every revolution gives rise to a political leader, Kashmir agitation gave rise to a Kashmiri Muslim leader, Sheikh Abdullah. In India, the main political leaders of the Indian National Congress were Mahatma Gandhi, Pandit Nehru, and Sardar Patel. In Kashmir, Sheikh Abdullah was rising as a political leader with a large number of Kashmiri Muslim supporters who wanted an independent Kashmir. In 1937, Sheikh Abdullah and Pandit Nehru met for the first time and later became political allies. On August 15, but Hari Singh couldn't decide which country to join or to remain independent. Pakistan got impatient and waged a war on Kashmir. Pakistani soldiers killed and raped scores of Kashmiri Pandits, Sikh, and Muslims in Baramulla and were advancing fast in Srinagar. 2 days later, a desperate Maharaja Hari Singh offered to accede to India in return for immediate military assistance. But he had to sign India's agreement called Instrument of Accession, which stated that it will control Kashmir's defense, external affairs, and communications only. Lord Mountbatten was British Governor General in India. When he signed Instrument of Accession, he suggested, not demanded, to let the people vote on which country they wanted to join, also known as plebiscite. Pandit Nehru should have refused because, after all, it was India, a 2-month-old nation, sending its own army, spending its own money and resources, and yet Kashmir can still choose to be independent or join Pakistan? But Pandit Nehru mentioned that we will hold a plebiscite in a speech on November 2nd, 1947. As Kashmir had the Muslim majority, it could have voted for Pakistan. Abdullah knew at this point that India cannot win the plebiscite without him. Nehru and Abdullah went to the UN to resolve the Kashmir dispute. UN Kashmir resolution was sequential and conditional. The first necessary step for Pakistan was to demilitarize. Then India will remove the bulk of its forces, and if the UN was satisfied, then the plebiscite would be held. Only because Pakistan didn't fulfill the first condition, the UN couldn't hold the plebiscite. Because of the strong power and support from Nehru and Kashmiri Muslims, on 17th March 1948, Sheikh Abdullah became the Prime Minister of Kashmir. At the same time in India, the constitution was getting formed by the Constituent Assembly, which is a body of elected leaders that make the constitution. As Kashmir joined India late, there was no representation from J&K. Minister of Kashmir Affairs, G.S. Iyengar, bent the Constituent Assembly rule for J&K. It was filled by Abdullah and not by elected leaders. He became the head of the Constituent Assembly. There was no one to look after the interest of Kashmiri Pandits, Hindus, and Buddhists when he negotiated with India. The Clause 7 of Instrument of Accession said that princely states were under no obligation to accept the Constitution of India. The accession signed by Hari Singh was no different than the accession signed by the other 561 princely states, but they all accepted the Constitution of India as their own. Abdullah had some different game plan. He used this clause and demanded an article in the Indian Constitution to protect this right. The most sinister aspect was that the Indian law will not apply without agreement of the state. B.R. Ambedkar, who was the chairman of the drafting committee, declared that he would not draft it. Nehru then requested G.S. Iyengar to do it. In 1950, the Indian Constitution came into effect. It did contain Article 370. Kashmir's flag could fly alongside the national flag. Kashmir will have its own constitution, and that some idiosyncrasies in titles and procedures could persist, like Prime Minister of Kashmir. In reality, Article 370 was a constitutional recognition of the demands of one person who was representing only one religious group. Indian Constitution came in 1950. The Kashmir Constitution came in effect in 1956. So from 1950 to 1956, Article 370 was a stopgap measure, and it was to be taken away as a temporary provision. However, the state's Constituent Assembly dissolved itself in January of 1957 without recommending what to do with this article. Thus, the article was considered to have become a permanent feature of the Indian Constitution. In early 1950s, several thousand of landowners, mostly Kashmiri Pandits and Hindus, lost their lands to land reform. Pandits demanded compensation for the land that they lost, but it was turned down. In 1952, Sheikh and Nehru again had another agreement, which was heavily criticized. In the meeting, Abdullah demanded Article 35A, as he thought that Kashmir's demographics might change from Muslim to Hindu majority. For Abdullah, Muslims were his vote bank, and chances of plebiscite was his secret weapon. Bypassing Parliament in 1954 with the help of the Presidential Order, 35A was incorporated into the Constitution. As per this article, people who are not residents of J&K cannot buy land in the state, thus manufacturing firms didn't establish. Jobs and growth opportunities ceased for Kashmiri Pandits. Females would lose property rights if they marry outside Kashmir, but it was not applicable to males. It was that discriminatory. The Plebiscite Front and JKLF were stirring anti-India sentiments. With Pakistan's support, insurgency escalated into an internal security issue. Sheikh Abdullah referred to the Kashmiri Hindus as Mukbar, or informers of the Indian government. Militancy was gathering momentum and anti-India sentiments were running strong. And then came the fateful night of January 19, 1990. Loudspeakers perched on top of mosques across the Kashmir Valley, blaring slogans of Azadi. Large crowds gathered outside and shouted anti-Pandit slogans. Pandits were targeted and killed. From that day onwards till the end of 1990, it is believed that 350,000 Kashmiri Pandits were forced out of their own homes and remained migrants. The government failed to provide security to them. Radical anti-national elements had infiltrated into the government over a period of time. From 2000 to 2016, Kashmir got 10% of all central funds for development despite having 1% of the population, but it didn't reach people. Where did the money go? Because of Article 370, RTE, RTI, CAG are not applicable in Kashmir. But why did Article 370 take 72 years to be abrogated? First of all, there were legal hassles with interpretation of J&K's Constituent Assembly, but above all, there was no political will. Today, Article 367 was amended, making the Constituent Assembly as J&K's legislative assembly. As the president's rule is imposed in J&K, Parliament will be the legislative assembly, and the bill passed with overwhelming majority. Tomorrow, the president will implement the resolution and revoke J&K's special status. The parliament has also passed the J&K Reorganization Act, and Ladakh will be a union territory. Welcome back to the studio. Now, Jammu and Kashmir will be ruled directly by the Indian central government. Kashmiri pundits all over the globe are rejoicing. This article played a role in the radicalization and separatist movement, forcing their entire native community to leave Kashmir. So what is the road ahead for Kashmir and Kashmiri pundits? Now, Kashmiri politicians and separatists cannot stir anti-India sentiments. The spirit of oneness of India, private investments creating new jobs, will lower the militancy. Kashmiri pundits can return back to their native land without worrying about their safety. Kashmir's special status gives a false image of the state not being a part of India. It has given a handle to Pakistan to interfere, and also an excuse to Western powers referring to the area as India-occupied Kashmir. Article 370 was a result of greed and power. It was never about Kashmir, neither Kashmiri Hindus nor Kashmiri Muslims.